Results television show. I'm Jean Oursler, your host, and also known as the Results Queen. Today we have Alise Cortez as our guest. Say hi, Alise.
Hi.
Yeah, we're so excited to have her. She is part of Alise Cortez and Associates. And today we're going to talk about a myriad of things because Alise knows so much about a lot. And the fact that she also hosts her own podcasting radio television show, right? Do you want to give the plug for that?
Okay, sure. It's on Voice America, so it's internet radio. Anybody with internet connection can listen to it. It's called Working on Purpose on the Empowerment Channel.
Yes, and I got to be on Alise's radio show, and she's now on my television show, so we're going back and forth, and we have a total love fest. So as you know, the Get More Results television show is to help you get more results both in business and in life, and we're excited to have you on as a guest today. One of the things that you and I both agree about wholeheartedly, Alise, is the fact that everyone needs a coach. So you tell me why you think everyone needs a coach.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started. Here we go. Well, one, right, I have made it my life's purpose in many ways to be able to work in the development domain, because I think that we're never ever done as individuals, as human beings, as parents, as professionals. We are never done. And I think in today's times, especially since it's so complex, it's so competitive, you have to continue to learn and to grow and to be challenged. And one of my favorite things I've heard people say, and even some of the guests on my radio show have said this in a beautiful way, is that whatever problem they walked into the room with, they can't solve with what they walked in with. They've got to be able to improve or address or somehow come to a higher level of functioning to be able to address a problem they come into a room with. And I often think that's a coach. And that means somebody who's willing to call you up on your own stuff, hold the mirror up and say, hey, do you see what you look like, what you're actually saying here? And do you know that you've got this really big, large blind spot right back here that's going to bop you over the head? Those are some of the things that coaches can do that we can't do for ourselves. And so I think if we really are going to become our best selves professionally, socially, in relationships, we really need somebody to continue to push us and help us grow.
Well, okay, then why is so many people anti-coaching? Why do people not even think they want a coach?
I think I know why, or I have an opinion as to why about that, Jean. I think that part of it is the old tapes of back in the day when people were assigned a coach because they were the problem child. And so I think people have an association with, I have a coach because there's something wrong with me. They don't see it as, I have a coach because I want to take what's already great about me and make it better. I think that's part of it. I also think that there's some stigma about the idea of, do I pay for my own coach? That's one thing, there's money out of pocket for that. And then if my company supplies the coach for me, does that mean that they've identified me as, a problem? When in fact, many companies will supply a coach to somebody who's high performance, high potential, and they want to develop them. I think there's just some weird old baggage stigma that's attached to the area of coaching that doesn't need to be there.
And do you also find that, and I hate to say it this way, but older people tend to use coaches more than younger people? Or do you see it across?
Wow, that's a great question. Let's talk about that really quick. That's a fun question. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I have an answer to that one way or the other. What I will say, though, I also teach at Southern Methodist University here in Dallas. I teach junior and senior level college students mostly to how to find and keep their first job once they get out of school. So I become kind of their coach in many ways. And they're incredibly coachable, Jean. They're incredibly coachable. They're hungry for knowledge. They want to learn. They want to grow. One of the things that I learned by teaching them this last semester, my brilliant students taught me, is that particular younger generation is deathly afraid of making mistakes. They have this idea they're supposed to be perfect because they've been given so much. They've been given a lot by their parents, by society, etc. So I think that maybe there might be a bit of a reticence for them to take a coach because they're like, but would that indicate that I'm not performing at a perfect level? On the same notion, though, on the other side of that coin, they are so open to instruction and to coaching and to hearing feedback about their performance. So I think it's a mixed bag. Whereas maybe the older generation, maybe it's true that the older generations have that more of the stigma associated with coaching that's negative, fixing a weakness kind of thing, versus improving on what's already great. Maybe, I don't know for sure. I would love to have the audience at some point weigh into this.
Yeah, that would be awesome, right? One of the things I remember someone saying to me, show me a young person who has a coach and I'll show you someone who's highly successful. And the reason why is that he believed, when we had this conversation, is that most people believe in their 20s and 30s and maybe even to their early 40s, they can do it on their own. They don't really need anybody else. And they're smart enough to do it on their own. Whereas, as you just said in the beginning, when you have a coach who can say, hey, there's your blind spot, or hey, let me hold up the mirror, or hey, let's strategize this, that you can be that much more successful and accelerate your growth of yourself and your company. And so this gentleman said, I really believe people come to coaching and realize they need coaching probably in their 40s and 50s and maybe even in their 60s. So just an interesting concept. I don't know if you have a thought about that.
I don't know that I do either, but I can get behind the general train of thought that you're describing. And I will tell you, curiously, for a long period of time, up until probably maybe this last year, a lot of my coaching clients came and found me. And many of them were young women, like in their 20s. And they said to me, I want to leg up. I want to get better at my work. I want to get better at communication. I want to get better at conflict resolution. I want to get better at talking about difficult subjects. I want to get better at navigating the political space at work. And I know I need help. And what I said to them consistently, Jean, was, wow, I wish I would have done that when I was your age. I wish I would have had the foresight to have somebody to even have that thought cross my mind, because it didn't cross my mind. I did it the hard way, right? I just kept slogging through. And you're right. I think maybe there is more of a propensity for us as we age to start to ascertain, wow, maybe I could use another perspective on this. Maybe I could use some help.
Yeah, well, and I think, and if you think about the statement that everyone needs a coach, there are people who say, I don't really need a coach. And you think to yourself, what about those people who think they don't need a coach?
Well, that's really interesting. Wow, that's a really great question. Let me take that in two directions if I can, Jean.
Sure.
First, I will say that I think that probably, as I said at the beginning, I think everybody can benefit from a coach. So if somebody's convinced they don't need a coach, I'd be a little concerned about that mindset, which must be, as Carol Dweck talks about in her book, perhaps more of a fixed mindset. I'm already good the way that I am. I'm always going to be great. No need for any change or improvement. And I just tend to go more toward her growth mindset, which is forever improvement, continuous improvement. The other piece I wanted to address in that is that I just came back from last week having the privilege of moderating a women's leadership panel for a pharma conference, and it was called the CPHL conference, having it being its first year in the United States. What was great about that, Jean, was this is a group of about 95 women up at 7:30 in the morning for a breakfast, and then the panel was at 8:30. And the whole idea was for them to get the idea that, well, women certainly need other people to be able to help advance their careers, help them with their leadership journeys, and just really help them navigate, in that case, more of a male-dominated industry. And so I think that if you take coaching to another level and you consider that there's a socialization aspect to it, where you're socializing yourself into something bigger than yourself, whether it's a group of people, whether it's a professional who has maybe a bit more experience or different perspective than you have, or whether you're joining a group of like-minded, growth-oriented people who believe in supporting each other, all those are related to me, the world of coaching.
I would agree with that. And what's interesting is you talked about facilitating this organization for the first time in the States. I know that you also travel internationally. What do you see about coaching, offshore, so to speak?
Oh, let me back up and say, I do love to travel, as we've talked about before, Jean. In fact, I'll be soon going on a vacation to Italy. I can't wait. And I've had the privilege of living in Spain, of living in Brazil, and going throughout Western Europe for travel and throughout South America for travel over a period of close to 3 years. Taught me a ton. And I'm from a small town in Oregon, so I'd never even seen a metro before. So mind-blowing experience for me in my mid-20s. And that opened up my whole vista to different cultures and how culture and language shapes how we see the world, how we choose to act, how we connect with people, all those sorts of things. And so along the way, I picked up French, which is my third language today, Spanish, Portuguese, and a little bit of Italian. And I love getting to do work where I can go down to any country that speaks those languages and being able to facilitate work in those languages. Such an honor to get to do that and connect with another, it's like another operating system in your mind, if you will, when you get to do that. And I'm so enriched by getting to have a conversation with somebody in another language like that. And I've done coaching in Spanish, some in Portuguese.
Really?
I think that there's something about being able to share an idea across culture and language in a way that each of you then become synergistically improved and, I should say, contributed to in the exchange, that you just can't compare if you're just in one language and in one culture.
Wow. Tell me more about coaching in Spanish and Portuguese. That's fascinating.
Well, first I have to back up and tell you, Jean, this is where you start to learn, what a nut I am. But
no, you're not, Alise. You're a highly accomplished woman. Now, come on now. Don't.
Well, I have my own quirks, right, Jean? And one of my things is I love to learn. And I pour myself into the things I like to continue learning. And so language is something I continue to hone. And so every morning while I'm getting ready in the morning, that's about an hour's time, I'm working on some kind of a YouTube video, which is either Spanish, Portuguese, French, or Italian. And so that's my morning routine. So a lot of times I'm studying things in those other languages that I can use with my clients. So one of the things that I have done along the way is I became a Gallup certified strengths coach. So I've done some very fun coaching in Spanish for strengths, both within organizations professionally as well as among couples in Spanish. It is so fun and so gratifying to get to do that, Jean, because again, you're now operating at another level. You're connecting on a different level. It's a different use of language, a different way of framing the world through those languages and that culture. So I've done a fair amount of coaching in Spanish, and again, some in Portuguese. So that whole notion of how to bring your best self, how to use your strengths, how to contribute your strengths at work as well as in relationships, I've done coaching on in different languages.
That is so cool. Have you started to travel the world to coach people in other places?
I haven't yet. I have done some Skype coaching and want to do more of that, of course, because it's great. It's not the same thing as being in person, but you and I are, doing something where there's a technological exchange, right? And it's still really yummy and awesome.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting because you don't really think about cross-culture coaching, right? And it sounds like there's a lot of lessons we can learn from that. Can you think of one lesson that we should be sharing right now to get better results in both personal and business?
Yeah, one thing absolutely, Jean, is the notion that we are an international marketplace today. And that requires us to be able to flex ourselves from whatever our native language and culture is across to some other. So invariably, what I find myself doing is I find myself coaching people who are maybe Spanish speakers who want to be able to better connect with the American culture and being able to speak English in an American mindset, an American frame. So they're flexing themselves to the American way. And then vice versa, I find myself working with businessmen and women who say, I want to be able to learn how to connect with people who are from Spanish-speaking countries or who speak Portuguese because I don't understand what matters to them, what values they have, and I want to be able to connect with them in a more meaningful way. So a lot of what I would say that has happened to me just organically is facilitating a cultural connection and exchange between people who speak different languages and yet want to be able to connect more meaningfully across their cultures and do business across those cultures.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I love that. All right, I also know you work on a lot of transformational work, empowerment. Tell me more about that, because I truly believe in transformational and empowerment work, and I think there's such a need for it across the world.
Okay, let me give a little context first to that, because I think it's, for me as a professional, when I got into the human capital space about 18 years ago, I really got on the recruiting front. And so I was acquiring talent for organizations and loved doing that. I felt like I was an ambassador to the organizations that I recruited for. I loved bringing people together that bridge their talent with a job that was going to pay them and give them a livelihood. I loved doing that. Over the course of time, what happened was I began to realize that wasn't enough for me anymore. I wanted to get further involved in the organization, so I did system implementation kinds of things around the HR space. And then again, organically, naturally, I found myself doing more learning and development work. Once you're in the organization, now how can we help you perform at a higher level, give you more skills, let you develop your leadership skills, et cetera, so you can navigate your career in the way that you want. And then I got really heavily into leadership development, employee engagement, communication kinds of work within organizations. Again, so you can start to see this really natural thread that pulled me up. Well, then now what happened was I got the opportunity by working through an organization called Insignium to take all of that past experience and weave it into really executive development, executive leadership development, and organizational transformation. So to get to a place where we're working with literally very high-level leaders across the globe on really significant business imperatives that are going to be the difference between perhaps them staying in business and not, and therefore truly transforming their organization to another level or into a different area. So it really is that compilation of all this past experience that I've had that lets me contribute these talents and get to work with these executives on this level that is incredibly satisfying to me. I'm grateful because they teach me every day, right? I'm only as good as the people that I get to work with, and the extent they challenge me to be able to deliver my best contribution to them. And in so doing, I'm fueled and I'm contributed to and encouraged and challenged to bring my game up even further, right? So it's this ongoing synergistic sort of interaction.
I love that. All right. So can you give some examples of some of the stuff that you've done? Because I'm like, wow. So tell me some of the stuff that you've done that's been successful. And I have some other questions after that too.
Oh, wow. There's a couple things I want to say to that, because when you said, the way you said that gave me a different frame on it, but let me speak to where we were organizationally. Okay. I had the privilege, and it really was a privilege, and I won't mention the name of the company because I don't know if you want me to speak about it, but I worked with the IT department of a technologically oriented company that wanted to transform their culture. And what they wanted, Jean, was they had sort of inherited this tendency that was framed within a culture of kind of fear and intimidation, that some of the higher level leaders, had gotten where they were because they were frankly screamers. They were good at getting things done by yelling at people and intimidating people, et cetera. And so the culture, of course, responded to that by, walking on eggshells and not really challenging whatever the leaders would say, even if they didn't believe it was right or viable. And so I had the opportunity with a colleague to go into this organization and start to do two things with them. One was to get them working from their strengths. So we did a lot of work within the IT department of getting them to start from their strengths individually, and then to position and reposition themselves within their requisite mini departments to be able to move around and do work that spoke from and drew from their strengths, and kind of offload the stuff that sucked them dry to other colleagues who love doing that. So really I would consider that to be a very, very novel approach to arranging how work gets done versus, hey, Jean, you just got to do it. It's your job. Just do it, even though it sucks you dry kind of thing. So that was really amazing work to get to do with the organization, and literally to see and feel and their empowerment. And then you could start to see the results of them really bringing more productivity into the work that they were doing. The second part of that initiative was the organization, the department wanted to get better at being able to push back on the rest of the departments within the organization to be able, since they were IT, to be able to handle those requirements in a way that was really going to serve the business. And they were not able to kind of push back or challenge or develop the requirements they were getting from the business in order to deliver the best value because they didn't have the communication skills. And so I did a fair amount of work with that particular department with crucial conversations. And I'm a big believer in that material. It's a 2-day workshop. It's very intense. So we did a lot of work with that. So between the Strengths Finder and the Crucial Conversations, that's one example of really getting to transform a culture by getting the top leaders buy-in and then cascading it all the way through the organization. It was a privilege, Jean, a privilege to get to work with them.
Yeah, it's always a privilege to work with people, right? So I know that you've talked about Strength Finders and conversations.
Crucial conversations, yes.
I want to say critical, but I knew it was a C word. Crucial conversations. For those who don't know about them in the audience, will you talk about both of those things?
I will, and then I'm going to talk about two other things as well. So Gallup organization is the organization that created Strengths Finder. And so I think it's more than 16 million people across the globe know their strengths. And so what it does is it ascertains your top 5 talents or strengths among a list of 34 talents. And so they're ranked according to strength. So you'll get your top 5 strengths when you take the online assessment. It takes about half an hour to take. And what it really gets to is your natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that can be productively applied. That's really what you're getting out of those strengths. And a lot of that gets to motivation and such, how you're going to go about something, not whether or not you can do something like a vocational assessment might give you, but really what juices you and how you throw yourself into something is really what it's going to give you. So your distinguishing edge, if you will. The Crucial Conversations platform is developed by an organization called Vital Smarts, and they have several other product lines as well, but it really dissects and gets into really 9 levels, 9, I guess, ingredients, if you will, of really good communication. And I think it's incredibly effective. If you use this at home, you'll be a better human being. Your spouse will appreciate you much more. Your children will appreciate you much more. Use it at work. I can almost guarantee that you will improve your results, your productivity, and probably your promotability, because it's that powerful. So those are 2 things that I've used over the years for a long time, and I believe in both of them. 2 other things that I will say around assessment-oriented or materials kind of work. Recently, I've become acquainted with an assessment called Spark, and it's delivered by a company called Lumina Learning. So Lumina Learning puts out their assessment called Spark. And what it really does, Jean, is it is based on the Big 5 personality and Myers-Briggs, et cetera, that kind of a whole background.
I'm sure people don't know what Big 5 personality is.
Big 5, yeah, is a common way that personality is assessed, and it is related to what Myers-Briggs did, et cetera. So the major characteristics that go into a human being is kind of where that comes from. And what it does is it gives you really 3 critical snapshots of yourself. It gives you your everyday persona, who it is that how you show up to be, how you flex yourself to be in order to get by in your environment. It gives you your underlying persona, who you really are at your core, your natural self, who you really want to be in all situations. And then it gives you your overextended self, when you have to kind of overflex certain aspects of yourself to get by in the environment that you're in. And it does that really by giving you an index score among polarities of 12 different values. So you're actually assessed on 24 total values. And then they break down to aspects and then 4 colors. But it's beautiful. It's beautifully done. I've never done a session people don't walk away going, oh my gosh, I learned so much about myself in that. It's just very powerful. So I've used that recently in many different leadership development sessions, and it's phenomenal.
I love that.
The other thing that I will tell you, you ask, what else have you been up to? For the last 15 years, I have been investigating how people find meaning in their work. And so it started with my PhD that I finished back in 2005, but I wanted to understand how people experience meaning in their work, and how does their work relate to their sense of self, who they are as a human being. So when I did my PhD dissertation, I came up with 5 modes of engagement, because I had a very limited group of people that I researched. That's by default, that's what a dissertation is. About 4 years ago, I augmented my study, Jean, and I interviewed 115 men and women between the ages of 18 and 74 across 20 different professions this time, not just one. And I came up with 15 modes of engagement. And they're on my website, alisecortez.com. But they really get to the notion of the level of meaning that somebody's registering in their work in relation to whether the work is really inseparable from who they are. It informs who they are, it expresses who they are, it just fits with who they are, it conflicts with who they are. It considers all those kinds of things in relation to the level of meaning that's highest registered. And I have found, and I'm working on writing a book around those results as we speak, but I have found that particular lens helps people really get a clear understanding of how it is they're experiencing their work, and what's good for them in their work, what's maybe missing for them in their work. And I don't know exactly where it's all going to go, Jean, because I'm still writing the book, but it's been phenomenal for me to get to exercise that creative and intellectual curiosity around the world of work with that investigation.
How come we don't call you Dr. Alise?
Well, I get called various things. As long as I'm not called late for a meal, I'm really happy. But I do get called Dr. Cortez. My students call me Dr. C. Most people just call me Alise, though, and that's great.
I think it's as someone who's pursuing her PhD currently, I totally get you. I'm in statistics, Hal, just so you know.
Okay, statistics, Cal, great. Mine was qualitative, so we're on different ends of the spectrum, but great.
Yeah, exactly. So then let's talk a little bit about leadership. In terms of leadership, what do you think makes a great leader? And how do we get people to be better leaders? And here's a third thing to talk about. I know I just gave you 3 things. And I know that's, I'm breaking every rule as an interview, but that's okay. And what do we do about these millennials? That's all I have to say.
Jeez, Jean. Okay, first, leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership is such a beautiful, fine art. It's such a privilege to get to be a leader. I would first say, in fact, I was talking to somebody about this recently. I think it was a radio show that I was on. Anyway, I tend to sort of gravitate toward the idea of situational leadership. What does the situation call for? What do we need? Do we need somebody who's going to come in and take charge because people are afraid and they don't know what to do? Do we need somebody who's more of a democratic kind of a leader who's going to really enroll people into a solution, into a way forward? I think oftentimes that's the case. But the one thing I would say absolutely fundamentally, my belief about leadership is that you still need to do it on an individual basis. Whoever it is you're trying to lead, you got to know who they are and what floats their boat and what they want from the situation. If you know that and can speak to that, then you're a leader to them. You know how to activate them, right? You know what matters to them and how to enroll them into whatever it is that you need to be able to lead and that you need their help with. So I'm a big, big fan of whatever it is, individually understanding who you're connected to. The second question was related to how do we get better at it?
Yeah, how do we get better leaders? How do we make better leaders?
Okay, and I've done a fair amount of leadership development work over the years. I think so much of it first has to get down to the individual person who wants to become a leader or who is the leader has really fundamentally got to really know who they are, what floats their boat, what are their values, what do they think a leader is. Because they probably have old tapes that they're not even aware of about what they think a leader is. Somebody, who takes charge, and if I don't take charge, I'm not a good leader. Or somebody who is supposed to be charismatic and supposed to win everybody over, and if I don't do that, I'm not a good leader. And all that's,
Yeah.
So I think first and foremost, I think a leader needs to understand and take really good stock, probably with somebody who can hold the mirror up with them, whether that's a coach or somebody else, as to what they think a leader is supposed to be and what do they want to be for a leader for themselves. And then once they do that, then they can kind of ascertain, well, where am I today? What kind of leader am I today? And you would do that, of course, by surveying or talking with or interviewing the people that they actually are the leader for. Then you've got the ability to be able to see, well, here's what I have today, and here's where I want to go, and here's the gap, right? And the other thing I think that is crucial is we don't know what we don't know. So if we're on a leadership journey and we're not aware that there are other ways to lead people and we're missing that opportunity because it's just ignorance, I think that some of that process needs to be able to learn the various kinds of approaches of leadership and kind of select what might work best for me, for my situation, what fits best for my personality, and put that in part of your gap analysis piece. And then from there, then you can start to identify, well, how do I get to becoming that next leader? Is it a matter of, right now I lead 2 people and I really want to get to a place where I lead 10 or 25? Well, that's a different kind of thing, right? And is it a leader or is it a manager? Right, there's a big difference. A manager really gets into handling the day-to-day affairs and breaking up work, et cetera, to make it more manageable and something somebody can do. Whereas a leader is casting vision, right? And they're casting an idea oftentimes that they want people to subscribe to and embrace and charge toward. That's different than a manager. So also being very clear about what do we want here, management or leadership? Mm-hmm. Those are some of the things that come to my mind for that question. Anything else you want me to say about that, or before?
That's good. Tell me what we're doing with these millennials.
Perhaps I'm a little tainted, Jean, but because I teach millennials at SMU and other places, I think that they're pretty amazing human beings, and I think they're and if you look at the numbers, they're the majority. They're fast becoming the majority in the workplace, and so they're a force. And I think they're interesting. They can multitask. They can use technology in ways that most of us can't. I learn all the time from these young people about how to make my life better because of their natural ability and proclivity to use technology.
Alise, thank you so much for being on the Get More Results television show. You've been an awesome guest. As I said, for all of you who would like to reach out to Alise, please do so. She is terrific. We look forward to seeing you again on our television show. With that said, I'm Jean Oursler, your host, The Results Queen. Thanks so much. Have a great day.